Yeah, I mean, where we were talking about, I think we're gonna get into like the value of like time, right? And like generational wealth. Martin brought up a lot of good points in terms of it's a transaction, right? And in a lot of cases where you give your time for money, there's that's the only way to um, have any income, to have any like wealth generating um, instruments is having a job. So
That's
I
right.
mean, there's plenty of different ways that you can like build wealth. You could have different income streams where you're not clocking in and out to get paid. You're not having to put in those hours like investing in stocks, investing in real estate, cryptocurrencies, like having your own business and having to be successful. So there's many options. So I don't know like what you guys think or feel the priority was growing up or with your like group of friends in terms of generating wealth and to having multiple sources of income and kind of building that out now. Once, while we're young, while you're still coming fresh out of college and thinking about like your future. So I don't know what you guys thought or if you guys even had those conversations, honestly.
Actually, I think it's been more as of late having those conversations, and I actually started having that conversation with my partner, where we were having conversations as to, how are we doing stuff for like, you know, retirement. For example, for her, she's already thinking about buying property and doing all that stuff, right? And for me, it's like we are in different timelines because I am not quite there when it comes to having the funding to be able to buy a property or uh, put money down for something like
Yeah.
that. But I do want to get there, right? And so for me, it's more about having those conversations with her as to how do we do that eventually, right? Together, if anything. Um, in the other piece for me that is coming up, it's the reason why I'm looking more into, how do I invest my money? How do I do it in a way where I am buying, let's say, assets that will create some sort of income stream, right? In the future, it's because in the future, I would actually like to have the opportunity, right, to decide whether I should work or not, right? Rather than me having to work. Um, I think I want to get to that point where I have the decision, I can make the decision, if anything, right? Rather than knowing that, at this point, I don't have the funding, right, available to make that type of call. So for me, I want to get to that. So
And then just to go off of that, for you guys, like when you think of like houses and like real estate, do you see like your primary residence as like an investment? Like, do you feel like your first like house that you live in is an investment, or is it more of a like liability since it's not technically generating money for you?
Yeah, I want to talk about that real quick because I feel like in our community, most communities, but especially in like the Latino community, I feel like finally once you know our families get to the point where hey, we can afford to buy and not rent, okay, great. And then maybe perhaps a second property if you we have that luxury to even be able to do that. Real estate is like our go-to investment option, right? And I think that's because number one, like it's well, it's tangible, it's a tangible investment, it has real world utility. Maybe the value, el valor de la casa fluctuates, but you still live in it at the end of the day. It's not like an asset class like crypto, which is extremely volatile if you're investing like in Dogecoin, which is like a meme coin, right? Real estate is something that's tangible. It's útil, you can live in it, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, I mean, it has a pretty good track record, like as far as right before the 2008 Great Recession. Um, a lot of families have been relying on the buoyancy of the real estate market to build wealth, to rent. Um, Personally, my family owns another property that we've had for a long time. But the thing is, because of the family ties and friendship ties that we have, we've never been able to rent it for profit because we don't want to, because
Yeah.
we have hella families like or friends that don't have a right. So we rent it to them for the same. We're not making. We're actually. Well, I think we're netting a loss every month. Just barely. But that's because we're trying to help them out. At the end of the day, we're still paying down the house, the mortgage. So eventually, it'll be fully ours. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. That our family. It's the easiest thing to get into. I just thought about that the other day. That's an interesting observation that real estate is like the go-to. But to answer your question, I guess I don't know if I see it. It depends on the market, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way the way I see it, it really depends, right? I think it depends if it's just like you said, your primary house where it's not a duplex, right? Where within the same property you have another house or something like that, or space available for somebody else to rent. I do see it a bit more as a liability, right? Just because in a way it's money that is going out of your pocket for a bit, but at the same time, if you and the reason why I'm saying this is because the only way that I would consider it essentially becoming an asset, right, is if you're buying it so that in the future you would sell it, right? And then using that money to go somewhere else, right? Just because the way I think about it, right, is that at this point, right, if you're planning to move to a completely different market, then all right, that makes sense, right? That's being an asset essentially. Versus like if you're planning to stay within the same market, right?
Oh, like
Then
going
up
in house and like buying something more
exactly.
expensive.
Then how is it really an asset at that point, right? When in reality you're just using that to move to a different place.
Yeah, it's yeah. I've always heard that kind of be brought up in terms of like you gotta save for a house, you gotta save for a house,
Yeah.
and I mean I live in LA, so like houses are crazy expensive, like a fixer upper for like $500,000 and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
for me it doesn't seem like the most like straightforward way to like build wealth just because of the climate in terms of the real estate market.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see people's viewpoint. I don't know, Ruben, from like your experience, and especially living in like Calexico and then living in the Bay, a super high cost of living area, what your experience is or your thoughts on like real estate and owning a home.
Yeah, I think for me, what's coming up in this conversation about real estate is actually, as I shared with y'all earlier, just being somebody who grew up in a family who almost every year we were moving because of how unstable income and housing prices were. And I'm sure all kinds of other factors, because no sé si les pasa a ustedes, I don't know if this happens to you all, but as I've worked on my own healing through therapy, counseling, and so on and so forth, I show up much healthier with my parents and I can have better conversations with them. And every time that I have a conversation with my parents, I learn something new about what was really going on in our childhood that I had no idea. What was really going on in our teenage years that I was like, oh shit, that's why X, Y, and Z, you know? So I highly encourage all of us to prioritize our own healing and healing the relationships with our family so that we can actually know our true stories of self and family, because those are so important and sacred for us to have. If we don't know our stories, we're going to repeat the same mistakes. And if we don't know our stories, we can't self-actualize to the fullest potential because we're limited in our knowledge of self. And that has to always be your foundation as you're journeying ahead. So when it comes to real estate, I think at this point in our family's life, you know, my parents don't own anything. I see how heartbroken my dad is. I see how disappointed in himself he is. I feel the sadness and the frustration that he has, that a lot of his success in life had to do with martial arts as an athlete, as a sensei, as a coach, and he has all of the awards and accolades that you can possibly imagine. To this day, my dad is one of the greatest martial artists in the world, period, full stop. but he doesn't have the bank account of one of the greatest athletes in the history of his sport. He doesn't own anything other than his medals. He doesn't have a pension. He doesn't have a savings account. So at this point in his life, his retirement plan is his son. It's whatever I can do to ensure that when my parents retire, that they're going to be taken care of. That's where I come in. That's where I have to know the stories of his journey and my mom's journey so that I can be wiser and much healthier and know that is my responsibility. And I'm honored to have their responsibility. I also want to be very clear with people. I don't buy into that bullshit of capitalism that your parents are a failure if they don't have X, Y, and Z. Fuck you. My parents survived capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and ableism every single fucking day. And the fact that they're alive today, and the fact that I am able to have close relationships with them right now is worth more than any property that they could have owned. I get to have the honor of being the first generation of our family that's transitioning us from working poor to working towards wealthy, right? Like, I'm honored to be that bridge. I'm honored that my future life partner, my future kids are going to have their own challenges and their own honors to sustain us towards having a healthier quality of life as a family.
And
But
I don't want to cut you off, but I think I want to kind of go more on what you just touched on, which is your financial planning involves your parents, right? It involves your family. And a lot of the personal finance, like literature and rhetoric, is always of the self, and like your like partner, if you have one, your kids, if you have one, and like how you plan for that. But at least in our culture, a lot of the times is like our family is very important and our parents are very important, and like their well-being is part of like my financial plan and like what I'm working towards, like building up and making sure that even if they don't have it because their life experience took them through so many obstacles, I'll have it so that they're able to like live a life that's comfortable for them, that's beneficial. So I don't think that gets talked enough about in terms of like your parents or like your guardians or whoever elders you have in your household or in your life. And I think it's important because I think a lot of us have that added section in our like personal finance portfolio that doesn't get talked a lot about, that isn't calculated in these retirement calculators, that you're not sure if it's the right move to do. Should you be saving for someone else that's not you? And I think that is very much what personal finance in the US is, which is make sure you're good, but it doesn't talk about like the people around you who you still are doing it out of like your own good, like, you know, if you care for your parents, if you care for your family, whatever it may be. So I think it's interesting that that was the first thing you thought of when you thought about real estate and your future and making sure you're doing right by them, because you are, I don't know how you phrase it. I think you use the word privilege or the honor to do it, which I think is very powerful to phrase it that way and see it not as a burden, as an extra cost, but as something that you're looking forward to doing for the people that literally did everything else that they could to kind of give you the life that you have.
Dude, yeah, like I can totally relate, especially to your experience, Ruben. I think we've had this conversation before about my dad too, you know, like the crisis in masculinity that he's kind of experiencing now, getting ready for retirement. I think he's about 59, 60. And he's ha trabajado his whole life, you know, so he doesn't have much as far as ownership of any capital, really, other than our other property, and just a few savings. So it's I can see also, and I saw it after the 2008 and 9 recession. A few years ago, we were really struggling. Just the frustration, the stress in his voice every time, I could always hear it, you know. And it's because we don't we don't, it's all about like the value we create versus owning the value we create as well. Sometimes we don't have the privilege to understand that and to be educated on that. And that's how really what capitalism rewards: ownership above all else. Any revenue generating entity, whether it's an asset class, real estate, whatever, as opposed to capitalism rewarding labor, which it does not do well. But anyway, so yeah, like so my dad, right? So like 2008, 2009, I remember it really affected us. And I remember it tempered, like most families, our expectations about what we could afford, our purchasing power. No more vacations. We haven't been to Mexico like in 10 years, basically, because of that. We never really had nice cars, but at one point my dad was expecting to kind of splurge on un carro, maybe not del año, but now we just buy used cars and all that. But, and this is going to sound like an advertisement for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but it's interesting that on the other side of the 2008 and 9 financial recession, a new technology was created, Bitcoin, as a result of the mistrust of the Federal Reserve, the government, the banks, because they were really the ones that were the catalyst for the crash that we had then. That new technology was created as a result. It's a peer-to-peer decentralized currency. Again, I say this at the risk of sounding like a paid sponsor of Bitcoin, but no, really, like, so I had this epiphany the other day that my dad is like okay with living the rest of his life, you know, whatever, relying on me as well and my siblings to kind of care for them after, but now really using this technology, this new asset class, to make it work financially. Now I'm in the process of planning to retire them, hopefully in a few years, if things keep going the way they have been. So it's funny that on the other side, the grass can be greener if you kind of, we pay attention to market trends and we become educated about what capitalism privileges, what it doesn't, how much access do we have to it. Because crypto is a completely open market. It's not fully regulated, but the rail, you can get involved so easily, so anyway, I just wanted to share that too, that I totally relate.
Anything you want to add or go on from there?
I think what comes to mind at this point, I think related to this is that I think we have also seen our parents' generation, if anything, right, to do some of what it is, I don't want to say expected, right, from us, because I think for example, in my case, and I'm pretty sure it's probably the same case for all of you, where you probably have had conversations with your parents about this. But for example, my mom has told me, like, I'll accept your help if you want to give me your help, but I am not expecting it, right? So I think for me though, I've seen my mom, right, even though as she struggles, right, for her to also still help my grandma, right, and to be the person that is the most constantly helping my grandmother. So because I've seen that, and I've, that's the example that has been, put in front of me, if anything, right? I want to continue doing that. And if anything, I've been doing that with my grandma at this point. But I do expect to eventually do it with my mom, to the point where, like, I've actually had conversations about this with my girlfriend, right? Where we've had conversations about, well, how does it look like if we were to be eventually together, right? Like, how do the financials look like at that point? Do we split things evenly? Do we not split evenly? Do we do percentage depending on who earns more, right? Do you get to keep your own budget, or does that everything come centrally? And so I think all of those different conversations, I'm actually grateful to have had with her already, if anything, right? And so I think that it has brought us together, if anything, even more, right? Just because of how open we have been about that, to a point where, for her, she also wants to be able to help her parents eventually, right? So I think this is why I find this to be so like beautiful, if anything, to be able to have this conversation, because like Ruben said, um, it's an honor to be able to do this because of for how long they helped us, right? And they shaped us to be who we are, right? We are in this path because of who our parents are at the same time, right? Who gave us or guided us to be, the individuals that we have been shaped to be at this point. So for me, like, I look forward, to the day where, I can start helping my mom and, helping her in a way where, she doesn't have to worry about, like money for food, money for like, her housing, money for, anything that she might need at that point, her health, right? So that's where my mind is at.
Yeah, Ruben, so cut you off, and I don't know if you turned off the lights because you got a little upset, but I thought it was a very good topic, and the way you phrased it was really important in the way we think about it, because even Jocelyn and we're saying it right now, where you almost feel like es tu deber, like, you have to do these things, but I think a lot of it comes from a place of love, like kids with their parents or grandparents, but it's never phrased that way, or it's phrased that way rarely. And I've had the experience where I'm like, oh, I don't owe anything to my parents. And they automatically assume that I don't want to do these things, but it's like, I don't see it as a debt. I don't see it as like me owing them. It's like, I want to do these things because I'm very grateful of how they raised me, of like what they provided for me, what they've done for me. But the first assumption for people is like, oh, you don't have a good relationship with your parents. And nothing is further from the truth with like how we see each other, how we talk, when we talk, the frequency, and that love and care. So I think it's just not spoken about, especially in our community. A lot of it is just very much like forced, like you need to do this, you must do this, you have to. And you saying that brought that into mind right away. So I thought I'd see what you guys thought of and what you guys have experienced yourselves.
Just
No,
to
yeah,
echo-
absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm grateful for the moment of pause and invitation for everybody to contribute, and I love that. I love that. I'm excited for all of those magic moments that we're going to have as we're launching this new podcast space. That I think when we come into it and asking ourselves questions, the organic nature, the emergent nature of the conversation is going to make a lot of magic. And, I'm one of the communities I'm at a part of is the emergent strategy community. And one of the core beliefs of emergent strategy is that there's a very unique conversation that the specific people that have gathered can have. And the invitation is for us to find that conversation together. So I'm always excited to co-create with y'all. And as you hear something, let's play that out. And I love music references. So it's like jazz, and you make the most beautiful jazz as you're feeling and vibing with each other. So I'm excited for us to continue in this path of co-creation. And at some point, there's going to be other folks in this space that we're going to be inviting. And as topics come up, questions come up, I'm sure we're going to be doing the same with them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of it is just these things that we touch on that maybe we don't talk about a lot, kind of ignite ideas and bring things to light. So it's just easy to start kind of getting each other's viewpoints and just kind of going off of those things. And yeah, it makes me reflect a lot on some of the things I've experienced, even just this conversation. And I think having this podcast and having this space available is going to open up a lot of conversations that are usually held in our heads or not really spoken about with people. So I'm very excited to see what other folks have to share, what others have experienced, and then how that relates to not only myself, all of us, but just our community in general. So I think it's an exciting time for us in terms of what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. Hopefully, as we bring on people, those insights are just going to allow for that growth and for for these conversations to continue to flow outside of this space, which I think it's what I'll be most excited about.
Especially now, I mean, this conversation needs to happen all the place. It should have happened hundreds of years ago, 50 years ago. It's urgent, it's pressing, but especially now more than ever in terms of the broader macroeconomic framework of things, you know, inflation is happening like crazy right now. We've had so much money printing, which is great. Our communities need that. But also the value of the dollar is going down. Our purchasing power is being reduced heavily with these all of the stimulus printing that's been happening. You know, our wages have not kept up with the cost of living for the last several decades. It's pretty much plateaued, our wages, but the cost of living has risen exponentially. So from a broader macroeconomic perspective, it's important that now, especially now more than ever, that we share what we're doing in this space, how we can diversify our streams of income and just get ourselves in our communities thinking. So we invite you, all of our listeners, and anybody else to ride this journey with us and continue learning as we learn with you. Yeah, it's a dope space. I mean,
Yeah, definitely agree. I guess as we're like closing and kind of this first episode, and people might have like even more questions than they did at the beginning. I think it would be great if you guys could share like one or two topics that you're interested or excited about, like developing in future episodes. That way, people get an idea of like what things we want to talk about and what we want to have conversations on. So I don't know if you want to start, Ruben or Jocelyn or anyone.
Go ahead, Ruben.
Yeah, no, definitely really excited. I think we're going to say this 1,000 times, but this is not financial advice. We're not interested in showing up to this space and give financial advice to anyone. We're excited to create a learning space, a space where we're going to be learning with each other and being curious and dreaming up possibilities with folks. So even the folks that are going to be listening in, I'm sure they're going to be offering some suggestions and some curiosities that will spark an interest for us to make that conversation happen. So really, really grateful for that, because I think folks are really exhausted of being talked at. They'd rather be in community and be learning together. So I appreciate that that's the spirit of the space. In terms of a particular topic that I'm excited about, I'm actually really excited about exploring conversations about wealth redistribution and folks that have like, you know, a lot of skills and abilities to make money and feel some type of way about that. Like if they're betraying their communities, and it's like, nah, bro, go get that bag and then give that back to the people that need it the most, you know? So wealth redistribution strategy, and other people that were born wealthy, that we can actively turn them into co-conspirators so that they can help us just transition past these systems that are creating harm. And along with that also, how do we navigate the survivor's guilt that comes up with getting your degrees and getting careers or getting access to like cryptocurrency and other ways that you start generating money, but you feel guilty of your success. And then sometimes you can play yourself and start limiting yourself and not really excel because you tell yourself that you're doing something wrong because not everyone else is excelling in your way or at your pace. So those are some of the topics that I'm really excited for us to get into here, and to be really mindful that intersectional identities impact that, right? Like the way that our female, the way that our femme, the way that our men experience that, so on and so forth, is different because of the social cultural dynamics of those identities that we have. So I'm super, super excited for the many conversations that we have ahead. How about yourself, Joe? Do you want to take it next?
I think one of the topics that I would like to eventually touch upon, it's how do we get material like this, right? Or things that we are learning at this point at our age, right? To be learned or to be taught at the age of, let's say, even high school to middle school, if anything, right? And how do you do it in a way where, you know, so that that generation is now prepared for, you know, taxes, you know, like 403Bs, like anything that is happening, you know, within their jobs and stuff like that, right? be able to negotiate salaries, right? Because I think for me, for example, like it was such a difficult thing to learn, right? As to like, you can actually ask for more money, right? Versus like being grateful to, just receive a paycheck that was, offered to you. So that's one of the topics that I would like to eventually touch upon. The other one would be more about like, what are the different things, mechanisms that as to that we, the four of us are doing at this point to try to generate, other income streams, if anything, just because I think we're four individuals, but we have completely different ways of going about that, creating stuff. So that would be pretty cool. And if anything, inviting other folks, right, to share,
Yeah,
right, what is
that
it
is
that
going to
they're
be
doing.
awesome.
So
Yeah. What about you? Yeah.
I think for me, one of the most exciting topics is how do you traverse this capitalistic system, thrive in it, and not feel like you're doing the wrong things, like you mentioned. Like, how do you deal with those dynamics of succeeding and thriving, but also wanting to have a community and make sure they're doing well and they're doing things to survive, to not only survive, but like thrive in their respective fields. And the other thing is I'm very excited about bringing on guests who have very different skill sets and expertise, because I'm always just trying to learn and I'm always like excited to hear about people's experiences and approaches and more of the non-finance folks' experiences. So me being in finance and like working as a financial analyst, like a lot of things in the industry are like just numbers, right? Like you have spreadsheets, you have presentations, it's zeros and ones. And it growing up, that wasn't the experience. So I want to see how other people experience this whole personal finance journey, not being in that space and just having a different experience.
Yeah, for me, well, you guys know me. I'm a blockchain advocate. I'm on to crypto. I'm a crypto guy. I'm by no means an expert. I just got into the space like 8-9 months ago, but I love to explore different topics within cryptocurrency as an emergent asset class and technology, and the potential that it has to offer users as well as investors, people trying to make money. So anything in regards to that, we can talk about Bitcoin mining, the ecological impacts thereof. Since all of us being Berkeley alumni, I feel like it'd be interesting that we can contact, the Cal blockchain, the initiative happening on campus. Just anything really, like the strategies that you can use as a trader or like as a passive holder or hodler, as we say. Anything in regards to crypto, how to set up even like the technical things, how to set up your cold storage wallet, how to keep up with the cycles, the altcoin market, all of that. So anything for crypto, you guys know I'm always down. And yeah, just along the same lines that you guys have been talking about, just, how do we navigate continuing to talk about generational poverty and the nature of capitalism, how we navigate that system, what are the different ways that we individually and anybody else who listens in or participates with us, whether as a guest or any other way, there are ways of surviving and thriving within the system. I'm game for. Overall, extremely excited about what this prospect is that we're doing. Just being here in the space with you all, share the space and discuss topics that we definitely don't talk about enough in our community. So grateful to be here.
Well, I mean, I don't have any other closing words. I don't know if you guys do, but if not, I mean, I look forward to just the next episode and being able to share more of these conversations with all of you.
Make sure you
Is this where Joe would do his outro that he recorded?
Yeah.
Smash that button.
Yeah, so sometime around here, Jocelyn's gonna have to record that
So-
and submit it.
Somewhere around here, there's a button. Make sure to follow, press it. We don't make a living out of this, but anything that comes our way will be great.